Okay, welcome. This video carries on from the series on the Marmot Report and related issues. Also on the playlist for this series is a video clip of Education Secretary Micheal Gove answering questions from the Parliamentary Education Committee on the 24th of April this year about school food standards, and in particular the effects of excluding academy schools from the standards. More on this later. For now, suffice to say that Mr Gove was very keen on stressing the importance of evidence, something I'm sure we'd all agree with. Since that session, the School Foods Trust has published a number of reports, one on general improvements to guidelines produced in school food, and a couple of others suggesting some problems with letting academy schools opt out. As I'm sure most of you know, this Act of Parliament placed new rules on the quality of school meals in England, so I'm not going to dwell too much on that. Full details, including details of the nutrient-based and food-based standards, can of course be found at the School Foods Trust website, which is an excellent resource. As I mentioned, a number of reports have been published recently. The first one we'll look at was on secondary school food provision and consumption. This is the first detailed look at these issues since the legislation and compared standards now to standards in 2004. Hopefully it will be the first of a series producing some good longitudinal data. So where is it? The report can be downloaded from this link. Suggest it's key reading for anyone interested in the topic, especially if you're doing a final year project on nutrition in young people. So how was it done? Read the report for the details. The report doesn't explain how the term nationally representative sample was defined in this context. I'm sure the SFT will be happy to explain the criteria used to interested students. The key finding highlighted here, since the standards came in, is that school food quality has improved significantly compared to the similar study done 7 years earlier. Okay, so this is how it was done. It was quite a big effort. Trained observers visited 80 secondary schools in England. They observed a large number of meals, both supplied by schools and supplied as packed lunches. The study lasted 5 days in each school. The observers looked at food provided both at mid-morning break and lunchtime. They also observed and recorded the food drink choices of a random sample of pupils having school food and milk, school food and drink at mid-morning break and at lunchtime. Of the food supplied, they determined how much was consumed and how much was wasted. Wastage is often a good way of looking at group food consumption behaviour. It's relatively easy to quantify, but of course may not reflect on individuals in a group well. So using these data, nutritional composition in school food lunches and packed lunches was determined. This was done by the usual databases, of which more in a moment. Head teachers and caterers were also interviewed about arrangements for meals and school policies relating to healthy eating. The Food Standards Agency Nutrient Database, Databank rather, which derives its information from McCance and Widdowson, was used nutritionally to analyse the meals. Here's a picture of Elsie Widdowson, taken in 1981. As most of you know, she was one of the foremost nutritional scientists of the 20th century. She gained a PhD, not in nutrition, I forget what, in 1933, but then, as was common for women, was unable to get a scientific job. So she retrained as a dietitian, during the course of which she met Robert McCance and they began their famous scientific partnership. As well as work that led to the supplementation of food with vitamins and minerals, they co-authored the chemical composition of foods in 1940, a body of work which is the basis for the nutrient databases we use in the UK. So the FSA1 and software-based solutions such as Compete and Jenny Ridgewell. Okay, some data. This chart's taken from page 7 of the report and shows changes in the type of food offered at lunchtime between the 2004 study and the recent one. So lines to the right of the median show where a food type has increased in composition, to the left where it has decreased. Broadly speaking, healthier foods promoted by the new standards such as compliant drinks, fruit juice, vegetable salad, water and starchy food not cooked in oil were offered more regularly in 2011 compared to 2004. Foods with less health nutrient profiles, such as condiments, starchy food cooked in oil, non-permitted drinks, that is to say non-permitted by the standards, Desserts including confectionery and non-permitted snacks are offered far less regularly now than compared with 2004. All of which suggests that the standards have been successful in this respect. This related graph on page 8 for some reason doesn't use the same chart type as the last one. Not quite sure why. I'd advise students not to mix chart types up. Think about the best way to visualise your data and then don't mix them up unnecessarily. Okay, moving on the data, we can see a big reduction in starchy food fried in oil and an increase in other cooking methods, so that would presumably be things like oven chips rather than deep fried chips, for example. The non-permitted food and drink category refers to food classes outside the standards. Again, we can see a big change for the better. The results for lunch boxes show similar improvements. For example, the number of pupils taking starchy food cooked in oil fell by 2/3. Chips are a good example here. In 2011, only 7% of pupils chose chips, compared to 43% in 2004. There have been some suggestions which I noted in a previous video that the School Food Trust work is over. Well, apart from the need to maintain standards, which we'll look at later in the context of academy schools, there are also issues around some micronutrients. Low intakes of zinc, iron and folate, which were also seen in 2004, remain a concern. In fact, zinc, iron and folate intakes have decreased since the previous study. The report suggests this may be due to fewer main meals being chosen compared to 2004 and may be linked to the decrease in energy intake. There are also some interesting comments and report in relationship between the amount spent on the meal and micronutrient intakes. Basically, if the spending is less than that for a free school meal, which is about £2.03 a day I believe, the nutritional content is low. If you're interested, have a read of the report. Moving on to the percentage of schools meeting the food-based standards. This chart's from page 70 of the report, and generally speaking, the standards have significantly improved matters. For example, the standards met most consistently were for salt and condiments, confectionery and snacks. Salt, for example, was only available in 3 schools out of the sample. An obvious anomaly is fruit. Only 2 schools provide at least 1 portion of fruit per pupil per day. The report suggests that this is likely to affect caterers trying to avoid wastage. Less than 5% of pupils took fruit, so including a portion per pupil had the potential to incur high levels of wastage from the caterer's perspective. Here's some quotes from report's conclusions. The comments on the need to remove less healthy options from the school food environment are, I would suggest, important. Okay, moving on to the academy schools data. First we'll have a little reminder of what academy schools are. Academy schools are directly funded by the Department for Education rather than local authorities. They're self-governing registered charities, were introduced by the then Labour government in 2000, and the coalition government is committed to greatly increasing the numbers of them. The coalition decided to remove the requirement to meet compulsory school food standards from academy schools. The rationale put forward by the Department for Education was that academies will always do their best for their children, and they are expected to deliver healthy food. If you're interested in academies, there is a Department for Education website which will give you lots of information on them, including some interactive maps if you want to locate where they are, which might be useful for those of us interested in geomapping. The number of academy schools has increased considerably since the last election, and as of April 2012 there were about 1,500 in England. As I mentioned, the DFE website includes information on the locations of academies and a useful interactive map, and here's the academy schools in central Middlesbrough. Okay, this is an article recently published in the Guardian newspaper. You know, it's a newspaper article, so it should be taken with a certain amount of, I wouldn't say a pinch of salt because we don't approve of that. It reports that some academies are ignoring healthy food guidelines. Jamie Oliver is of course quoted, and he's not keen on this, and good for Jamie in that sense. As ever, you should go back to the original source, which in this case was a report published by the School Foods Trust. And there's a link to the report which we've which we're going to have a look at in a bit. As I mentioned, the coalition government has exempted academy schools from the nutritional standards. I mentioned there's a link video, this is a screen capture from Micheal Gove addressing the Education Committee. It's a little bit unfair on him since he was speaking before these reports were published, but his comments to the Parliamentary Education Committee are worth hearing, so have a listen to the other video as well. When asked by committee members about food standards in academies, he, as well as asserting his devotion to Jamie Oliver, said that academies had not lowered nutritional standards. So as I mentioned, I've got a separate video of his comments. It will appear soon in the Marmot Report playlist if it hasn't already, and I'll put a link in the info bar. Okay, so the SFT has produced a number of reports about the quality of school foods in academies. The Academies and Compliance with School Food Standards Research Overview is an executive summary of recent research done by the School Foods Trust in this area. We'll look at a bit more detail at two of the reports shortly. As usual, they can all be found on the FSFT's website. Before we go on, I will note the recommendation from the research overview. Every child eating at school should be entitled to a healthy, balanced meal. Consequently, all schools, including academies and free schools, should be required in law to adhere to the school foods standards. Acting on behalf of the Department for Education, the SFT surveyed 12 academies and 1 free school. Reminder that free schools are another model where the school is outside local authority management. For the purposes of this survey, they were all regarded as academies. This seems like quite a small study, but it may be justified as a sample to see if there are any issues which need addressing in a larger exercise. It was a qualitative study, so the researchers were able to drill down on the details in ways that may not be accessible to larger quantitative exercises. Okay, we're up to about 13 minutes, so what I'm going to do now is stop this particular video and I'm going to recommence shortly.